Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me, of course, is Mike Tagliere. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL Tags. How you doing?
It's a somber mood. I feel like, fall is nice, when fall weather gets here, but I feel like we're getting closer and closer to winter. Like, I tried to take a walk earlier today, and it's just not working out for me. So I feel like I have to get on the elliptical inside, which is not as fun as walking outside. So, I don't know. It's a weird day. I feel sad.
Well, I enjoy the 2 weeks that we get fall here in New Hampshire before it goes from summer to winter.
Yep.
I miss living in New York. But regardless, we have to keep going, and we have a great guest with us to talk about all the waiver wire happenings this week. It's Adam Aizer, host of the Fantasy Football Today podcast over at CBS Sports. You can find him on Twitter at his name, Adam Aizer. Adam, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I took a nice walk to the curb last night to take the garbage out. It was quite cold, and then I came back in quickly.
Where are you? Are you in New York?
I'm in Westchester, New York, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you're there. I want to ask you something, Adam, because you're the host of your podcast, but right now you're the analyst. How does it feel when you're in the different chair? Is it weird for you, or is it just like old hat since you obviously do some analysis as host?
It's not that weird. I just feel bad for you and all your listeners having to go from Jamie 1 week to me this week,
Yeah, we give a little. I mean, you're not on for it, but we're going to give a very long intro before we get on, apologizing in advance for the lack of analysis that you'll be getting from our guest.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. All right. So look, today we're going to start today by breaking down our Sunday night game, but for the most part, we are just going to be talking about waiver wire, who we're looking to pick up, who we're not, how much fab we want to spend on these guys. But again, as I often remind you, if you want to do it right, use our waiver assistant over at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. Identify the top players to add in your league. View the percentage of experts who would add that player to your roster and get a detailed analysis of the impact on your team. Seriously, especially if you have multiple leagues like most of us do, it really helps kind of sort out what you need to be doing in each and every league. Again, that's fantasypros.com/playbook. All right, we'll start with the Sunday night game, as I said. Then we're going to talk about notable waiver wire pickups at each position, beginning with running back, then wide receiver, QB, and then tight end. We'll talk about our 5 overall top waiver wire pickups, our top QB and DST streamers, and then we will play a game of drop or keep, where I will list 10 fringy rosterable guys and ask you guys if you want to drop them or keep them. But let's start with the Sunday night game. 49ers 24, Rams 16. I have only one rule. You cannot opine on whether Cam Akers is droppable, because that is a question I will be asking you towards the end of the show. So that's my only rule as we recap this. We talked about Raheem Mostert before we started recording. We do not know the details of that. He left with an ankle injury. Didn't look serious. We'll monitor that. We'll talk about that more when we get into the waiver wire pickups. But let's talk about the 49ers wide receivers here to start. Deebo Samuel, 6 targets, catches all of them, of course, because his ADOT is like negative, if that's possible. 66 yards and a touchdown. Adam, after this game, Deebo Samuel, value up, value down, value the same?
I think it's got to be up a little bit. He's got 14 targets in his last 2 games. In CBS leagues, he's rostered in 76% of leagues. And I think that's a little bit low. I think he's maybe more of like an 80 to 85%. He's not a 100% roster kind of guy. He's not a 100% start kind of guy. He's solid. But yeah, it's so gimmicky, their offense, right? But it works for them. At New England, at Seattle, in Green Bay coming up, at New Orleans. You've got a chance for some shootouts there, for some games with a lot of points. So I like Deebo Samuel. He was only started in 14% of CBS leagues, so people aren't super confident in him. I do think he's the kind of guy where you can see a lot of fantasy managers start him next week and get a total dud. So, I might be looking to try to sell him, but mostly it's just a hold. Let's see where it goes, because going into the year, I was pretty optimistic for him.
So I know you don't do rankings, but if you were to just ballpark it, you think if you had to go rest of season, like in the high-end wide receiver 4 category around there, or higher or lower than that?
I would say higher. I would say somewhere around 30 to 36. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. How about you, Tags?
Yeah, he would definitely be in the wide receiver 4 range for me. I was always worried, he's obviously impressed, having 6 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown on just 6 targets in this game was impressive, because a guy coming off of foot surgery in the same calendar year, especially just a couple months ago, that's extremely difficult, and we see a lot of wide receivers really struggle with efficiency. This is not a high volume offense, but he got this done in a good matchup, so the stock is definitely moving up in the right direction. But once you get into that range, you're looking at guys that are, guys like T. Higgins that are getting 7-8 targets every single single game. I don't know if we can rely on that from Deebo Samuel with George Kittle there, with Brandon Aiyuk. Does Jerick McKinnon become part of the offense again or not? I don't know what's happening there. But the stock is definitely up, and I'm with you, Dan. I think I'd put him in like that high-end wide receiver 4 territory where I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that's about where I'd have him. I think he's a guy who you can start most weeks, but like Adam said, there is certainly a decent chance that you're going to be disappointed almost as often as he performs well for you. Meanwhile, you mentioned tags Brandon Aiyuk, only 4 targets, 2 catches, 12 yards. He does find the end zone. Same question here, Adam. Brandon Aiyuk, value up, down, or the same?
I think it's down. I'm fine dropping him. I know he had the touchdown. That's great, but that's now 9 targets in his last 2 games, and I just think that Deebo's ahead of him and Kittle's obviously ahead of him, and this is a team that's not going to throw for a ton of yards. So there will be some good games, but I'd drop him for Travis Fulgham. I drop him if I needed a tight end or even a second tight end because that position is so hard to find. I'm just not excited to have Brandon Aiyuk on my roster just this year. Dynasty is a different story, but I don't think you need to roster him.
So you would drop him for one of the waiver wire wide receivers that we'll talk about coming up, right?
Yeah.
All right. How about you, Tags?
I would also drop Brandon Aiyuk. I was saying last week that he's just a guy that he's the number 3 target at best in this offense. And this team does not want to throw the ball a whole lot. They want to be that run-first offense. Can they be? I mean, we'll see. But yeah, I'm with him. You could drop him.
Okay, let's go to the Rams offense. Kind of an off night just overall. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods combined for 19 targets, but just 7 catches and 40 yards combined. Woods does find the end zone. Adam, just out of curiosity, I assume that you probably both as essentially mid-tier or high-end wide receiver 2s, but do you have a preference between the two?
I think I prefer Cooper Kupp. Look, he dropped a deep ball, wasn't the easiest play. He dropped a touchdown. He should have had that. And then Goff should have a big game because after the drop touchdown by Kupp, he threw an interception in the end zone.
Right.
I prefer Kupp. I'm a little nervous about Robert Woods. It was good to see Goff finally throw 38 passes. That I believe was a season high. But they're a running team. They want to run. And that's usually 31, 32 pass attempts. And that's oftentimes 5 or 6 targets for these guys. So, Woods will get you a little bit of rushing. The bottom, they're going to be good, right? They're going to be good. But I don't think they're going to be great this year. I've lowered my expectations from the beginning of the year. So unless they start getting into games with more points being scored, and they're done playing the NFC East, so it could happen. I think these guys are slightly overrated, at least going into the game. I don't know what people are thinking about them right now. But I like Kupp better than Woods.
Yeah, and they do have Chicago next week, who generally limits wide receivers. How about you, Tags? How are you viewing the guys?
Yeah, I also have Kupp a little bit higher because basically if they're going to leave Tyler Higbee out of the offense, which they've kind of done, his snaps are limited, his pass routes are limited, the pass attempts are limited, and when the tight ends are out of the picture, they have Kupp over the middle of the field, and Goff's been better when he targets Kupp, when he's heavily involved in the offense. Robert Woods coming into this week, he had averaged just under 6 targets per game in his last 4 games, so that was like it was like a quarter of the season sample size. So it's clear this offense changes from year to year, and it just doesn't seem like Robert Woods is the focal point anymore. It's hard to say that Kupp is either, though, because again, this team, I think it was a 33 pass attempts was his high coming into this game for Jared Goff. So they do want to run the ball. And then a brutal matchup coming up against Chicago this week on primetime television. And the last time Goff played against the Bears, it was on primetime. He threw, I think, 38 pass attempts for less than 200 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. So it's not going to be a great week for Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods next week.
All right, so Adam, you mentioned that Sean McVay wants to run the ball as much as possible, so let's talk about the running game here, bearing in mind the one rule that I gave you before we got into this. Darrell Henderson, 14 for 88 on the ground, almost had a couple of almost TDs in this game, but obviously that's a good at least yards per carry. Malcolm Brown, only 5 touches, 22 yards. I think what I saw was Cam Akers played 1 snap and had no touches, if that's correct. So, I mean, are you ready to trust Darrell Henderson at this point, Adam?
Well, first of all, it's really weird that you and I, as hosts, use very similar terminology, like value up, down to the same, almost touchdowns. This is like a weird parallel universe for me right now.
I'm not sure whether to take this as a compliment or an insult.
It's a compliment. It's just
all right.
Yeah, it's just an observation. Like, I love it. You're a great host. So I must be doing
You're invited
right.
back anytime, Adam. Anytime you want to come back, you're good to go. Anyway, but go ahead, analyst Adam.
Yes.
Go ahead. Are you trusting Darrell Henderson?
I mostly trust Darrell Henderson as much as you can trust someone who's pretty much completely uninvolved in the passing game. He's their lead running back. However, Sean McVay before the game said it's going to be a week-to-week and a game, within the game sort of flow thing. And then after the game, he just gave a ridiculous. It was more the result of Cam not being able to get into the flow because we had such a minimal amount of drives in the first half. We got it, blah, blah, blah. It was like so stupid. So I do think it's going to be quite frustrating. I trust him not that much. I like a 5 out of 10 on the trustometer.
Okay. That's one I don't use, but I'll consider putting it into my vernacular. One thing that Tags and I were talking about last night when we were recapping the game is that the way you feel about Henderson, it's funny because we feel that way about so many running backs. And in the end, it's like, oh, yeah, but he's basically 20th rest of season because once you get to that level, you're just like, yeah, I don't trust Darrell Henderson all that much. But in the end, it's hard to find too many guys that I do trust. So Tags, how do you feel about Henderson here going forward? And where does he rank in your rest of season ranks?
So I was just looking at that, and I have him at 27th, and I don't feel great about it. I still think that he's a sell high. You could probably hold on to him because they're not going to be able to throw the ball against the Bears. The Bears' run defense has been a little iffy, not great against the run. So I think and then they have Miami in week 8 before their bye. So maybe you hang on to Darrell Henderson for another 2 weeks, get yourself through some bye weeks, and then trade him going into his bye because coming out of their bye, they're going to play against Seattle, Tampa Bay, and the 49ers. Those are 3 teams that have just not allowed a whole lot of fantasy points to running backs. And I know that Darrell Henderson just looked good last week against this 49ers defense, but what did it really amount to? Did it amount to like you feeling really great about Darrell Henderson? No, he looked good, and I think he's looked good in weeks past. He looked great in week 3 against Buffalo, and then all of a sudden in week 4 happens and he gets 8 carries against the Giants, and you're like, oh no. McVay has told us he is modeling his run game after Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, which we know are Shanahanigans. We've been there before. This is like a thing that's been a thing for a long time. You cannot trust any Rams running back, even if Darrell Henderson does look good. So again, write him out for 2 more weeks and then sell when it gets to his bye.
Okay, I look forward, Tags, to us basically being like, man, you got to get rid of this guy. He's not going to keep it up. And where does he rank in your weekly rankings? He's about 13th for us. That's basically how we roll this year. Okay, guys, let's get into our waiver wire pickups here. We'll go position by position. A couple of news items that are breaking essentially as we are podcasting. One is Zach Ertz has been diagnosed with a high ankle sprain that is expected to keep him sidelined for 3 to 4 weeks. And Miles Sanders has a knee injury that we knew about. There's no details as to what exactly the nature of it is, but the early thought is that he's going to miss 1 to 2 weeks. He will certainly be out for the Thursday game that they have this week against, I believe, Adam, your Giants, right? You're a Giants fan?
My Giants, who have not allowed a running back to have a 15-yard carry in 4 straight games. So how about that?
Vaunted Giants run defense, as we know. I do appreciate you winning a game so that my Jets can have a clear path at the number 1 pick, although we will undoubtedly win 4 meaningless games at the end of the season to get like the 6th pick and ruin everything. Let's get into our waiver wire pickups. Let's start with running back. Adam, who is your number 1 waiver wire pickup at running back?
Well, it really depends so much on the news, because if you knew that Joe Mixon, we're sort of in the dark on what his situation is. But if, let's say, Mixon and Sanders were both going to miss the game, it would be Giovani Bernard with a bullet. He's been a stud. He didn't play without Mixon last year, but in 2017 and 18, he was great in 4 games without Joe Mixon. So he's involved in the passing game. So he'd be number 1. If not him, then Boston Scott would have to be number 1. But I'm not sure it would be. I guess you could go. It depends on Justin Jackson and his roster percentage. But I think I'd go Boston Scott, even though I don't expect a huge game from him.
Okay, so 2 things. One, if Jackson were available, let's say his roster percentage, because we showed across a bunch of different leagues, it's under 50%. That's kind of essentially where we do the cutoff. So where would Jackson still be 3rd on your list right now, even if he were available?
No, I think I'd put him over Boston Scott because it's facing the Jaguars this week, and they're horrible. So, and plus he's got a little bit more shelf life, I think. So Jackson would be ahead of Boston Scott, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, so we're in this weird, as you mentioned, this weird vein right now. We're recording this on Monday, so we don't know what Joe Mixon's status is next week for Cleveland. We do know that Miles Sanders is out, and we do know Justin Jackson's situation. So right now, Adam, you are forced to make your decision without knowing. How much of your fab would you be willing to spend on any of these guys?
So for Justin Jackson, I would probably spend about 15% of my original budget. Although I guess if I really needed to win, this, I don't know if you guys have encountered this, but every week we do how much fab would you spend? And then we look at our leagues and it's always higher, right? So people are desperate. So if you really need something from Justin Jackson, I think 30% of your original budget is fine if you need to get a win at this point. For Gio, if I knew Mixon were out, even for one game, I mean, Gio to me is worth 25%. I think he's going to be great. Boston Scott is more like 15 to 20%.
Okay. How about you, Tag? So talk about those three guys and where you have them ranked.
I have Jackson ranked number 1. I think he earned that starting job against the Saints. That was a brutal matchup that I figured Joshua Kelly would struggle in, and I thought Jackson had a chance to overtake that job because Kelly would struggle, but it happened mid-game, and they went to Jackson, who was more involved in the passing game. So I have him as my number 1 option. I think he has rest of season value. He may overtake that job alongside Austin Eckler. He's a more versatile back than Joshua Kelly. We talked about Justin Jackson. Whenever he gets an opportunity, he's been pretty efficient with the touches he's given. So I do like him, especially going against Jacksonville. In terms of weighted opportunity, Jacksonville is allowing the second most weighted opportunity to running backs. So there could be a chance for both of them to be successful in this game. But again, Eckler's going to be out for another couple weeks. So I do like Jackson, who's already gotten his bye out of the week the most. Boston Scott's my number 2 against the Giants. The Giants, as Adam said, they have been pretty good against the run. They're allowing under 3.9 yards per carry on the season to this point, but they have allowed a massive 78.3 PPR points through the air alone to running backs. And Boston Scott, going back to the end of last year, he's caught 31 of 36 passes for 252 yards. He saw six plus targets in 4 straight games at the end of the 2019 season, which did include a game against the Giants. This Giants team is obviously different under Joe Judge, but knowing that the tight end situation is the way it is with the Eagles right now, that they're missing guys over the middle of the field like Miles Sanders, they're missing Zach Ertz, they're missing Dallas Goedert. Those are a lot of targets that correlate with someone like Boston Scott, who's used in the passing game. So I do believe he's going to offer RB2 value for this week. We don't know exactly how long. It says Miles Sanders has an ankle injury. We don't know if it's a high ankle injury or whatever, but he's not going to play on Thursday. So if you need a 1-week starter, Boston Scott's the guy that you go for. I mean, if your team's sitting at 2-3 or 2-4 in your fantasy league and you really need a win, you need to go up and spend fab for these running backs because, I mean, the running back position's ugly. As Dan mentioned, we get to the point with running backs where we're like, yeah, I really don't like him this week. And then you look at your rankings and you're like, why the hell is he at 21? Right. And it's because the lack of options, the lack of true workhorse options. So again, Boston Scott will be an RB2 this week. I think Jackson's going to offer RB2 value this week. And then as for Giovani Bernard, I'm not expecting Mixon to miss any time just because Mixon did come back to the game. He ended up leaving the game again in the fourth quarter with like 10 minutes to go. So there are question marks about that whole situation, but the matchup against the Browns this week is not particularly good. I mean, Joe Mixon carried the ball quite a bit against them in their week 2 matchup, didn't do particularly well. The Browns have done good on the ground, so Bernard needs to get it done in the passing game, which he can, but I still think that I would prefer Boston Scott just due to the matchup.
Okay, that was a lot of talking, so I have a lot of things to respond to, but I will try to keep it as short as possible. Number 1, Tags, Sanders is a knee injury, and it's 1 to 2 weeks, which I told you before you started talking, so stop ignoring me when I tell you things.
I don't know why.
Number two, if Gio Bernard, if we know that Joe Mixon is going to be out, and most likely you are going to know before you have to place your fab bids, or at least you'll know if there's a chance that he's going to be out, then Bernard would be my number 1, because I do think that I will have him ranked the highest next week if Joe Mixon is out, despite the fact that it's not that great a matchup. We've seen Bernard succeed when he is the guy in Cincinnati, and I think they'll get him involved enough, especially in half PPR, which is our default format. The passing work is going to save him. For right now, I am expecting Mixon to play next week. We were joking about it before we started. Does anybody know when Joe Mixon's last carry was, or when his last touch was, or when he was out of the game? So it's really unclear. For now, I actually have Scott the highest, and the reason is we now know that Miles Sanders is out. He is going to, I'm sure, split some touches with Corey Clement, and as Adam said, not the greatest matchup, but despite the fact that he completely flopped in the beginning of the season when he had the chance when Miles Sanders was out, we did see him succeed at the end of last year. I think he roughly averaged 88 yards per game over the last 4 games that he played, essentially without Miles Sanders. And I do think, like you said, they are so decimated right now along their offensive line. Ertz is going to be out, as we just talked about. I guess DeSean Jackson is coming back. I don't know if Alshon Jeffery is coming back or if Alshon Jeffery will be playing if he comes back. Right. They're going to need to get the ball out quickly. So I do think that he is the play mostly for this week over a guy like Jackson for me, just because I'm not ready to draw full conclusions from what we saw last week against the Saints, because we all like Joshua Kelly. We all liked him. We all had him ranked higher than Jackson. And while I have Jackson ranked higher rest of season, I don't know that I'm just willing to trust it because Kelly didn't look particularly good in one game. Kelly looked great early in the season, had a couple of off games, so I don't feel that comfortable knowing what Jackson's role is going to be in this game. So I have...
I just wanted to follow up on that because I feel like I undersold Justin Jackson as I was listening to Tags talk about him because, when Eckler got hurt, I had brought up, people were Dearness Johnson or Justin Jackson. I said, I'm going with Jackson because I think he's got a chance to be the starter, whereas Dearness Johnson has zero chance of overtaking Kareem Hunt. And it only took one game, I think. We don't know what's going to happen. But going into last week's game for the Chargers, Josh Kelly had fumbled 2 straight games. And I do think he looked good early in the year, but I don't really think he's looked so great lately. So I think Jackson has really, like Tags was saying, has a chance to be the starter and then really have a pretty good role even when Eckler comes back. So I think I may have undersold what I'd spend in terms of fab for him. I think you might have a guy that's at least worth considering rest of season, in a pinch, in a bye week with injuries, kind of like what we thought Josh Kelly was with Austin Eckler healthy. And before Eckler gets back, which he said could be 3 to 4 weeks, but we don't know. This is a pretty serious injury for Austin Eckler. And Eckler's not the biggest guy, and this is the first time he's getting like real feature work and he gets hurt. I'm thinking that there's a chance that Justin Jackson has a pretty substantial role rest of season and obviously a big one before Eckler gets back. So he's long term, he's definitely number one here. And yeah, we already talked about short term, but I kind of felt like I may have undersold it. I think you guys Tags made some good points about it.
Now I agree with you. I'm taking the over on whatever the timeline is for Eckler because you heard him talk about it on the radio about how, like the muscle or whatever, the tendon ripped from the bone. Like that just does not sound like somebody who's like, I'm going to be back in 4 weeks. I mean, it just makes me cringe just listening to it. The other thing to think about, and we bring this up most waiver wire weeks, is that Jackson is now past his bye. And when you're thinking about long term and what guys are going to look like, somebody being past their bye is a big deal at this point because a bye week, as we know, we are all scrambling to find running backs that we can start on a week-to-week basis. So having somebody who's past their bye really does make a difference. Now, to be clear, I do have Scott number 1 and I have Jackson number 2. It's the same fab percentage that I would be willing to bid on both of them. It's essentially 15 to 20%. But as Adam, as you mentioned, you got to win. You got to win. You have leagues, where people are 1-5 or 2-4. You got to win. And if you have to win, do what you need to do to get a running back who's going to get a guaranteed 15 to 20 touches because that could make all the difference. All right, so let's go beyond these top 3. Let me ask you, Tags, is there anybody else you're thinking about at running back?
It just depends because bye weeks are here and some people are going to be looking for guys like JD McKissic. We talked about him last week where if you're in a pinch and you're looking for someone, he's been getting like 6 targets, like a floor of like 6 targets in a game. And if they fall behind, which they really should against Dallas, we should see his role featured a bit more than Antonio Gibson. So JD McKissic is someone that can help you get through bye weeks. Frank Gore is going to go on his revenge tour against the Buffalo Bills next week. Royce Freeman against Kansas City, provided that Melvin Gordon doesn't play. But those are guys that you're not really excited about.
All right. What about Adam? We were talking about it a little bit. Let's say Mostert is out next week. We saw JaMycal Hasty get most of the carries and not Jerick McKinnon. He's somebody who is widely available. He's, according to our roster percentage, 0.1% rostered. So is he somebody who you think that fantasy managers should be looking at if just in case Mostert's out next week?
I actually do think so. It really seems like McKinnon, as we sit here and record this, we don't know of any injury to Jerick McKinnon. It really seems like he just got benched. And McKinnon had a long carry in week 2. And since then, the 3 games that Mostert either hasn't played or left with an injury, he's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. He just hasn't been very good. Tevin Coleman wasn't very good. So I believe he may have really just been benched. He was good for fantasy, but he wasn't good running the ball is what I meant. So yeah, Hasty is definitely someone that you should be looking at. And I just want to add something on McKissic here. McKissic, I don't know how much this matters to you. I think he's a must-add personally in PPR. But his next game is against Dallas. We'll see what they do tonight. But going into this Monday night game, they are giving up the second fewest receiving yards to running backs. They've been terrific. And then the next week after that is a bye. So that could be a disappointing ad, but I still think it's worth taking a shot on J.D. McKissic.
Yeah, he's got at least 6 targets in 3 straight games, and Kyle Allen likes to focus on him. Now, I mean, I hate mentioning, but you did mention Frank Gore, Tex. He wasn't terrible yesterday, and we were joking that I was forced to start him in a league. But
what a Jets fan. What a homer.
Right, yes, exactly. If everybody knows, the only thing I do is I love adding Jets players. Joe Flacco is my number 13 quarterback going forward. But what about Perine? Because Perine didn't look that great, but if you are looking long term, and I don't want to fall into the fallacy of rational coaching, but you expect for them to say, well, goodness, this just might be a lost season. Maybe we should look at this young running back that we drafted. He did have more snaps than Gore. Is Perine somebody who you think at any way that fantasy managers might want to add?
We're talking about the Jets, a team that signed Le'Veon Bell to a stupid contract, and then they signed Frank Gore to a non-contending team that had some running backs on it after they drafted Perine.
Wait. You're also missing the attempt to trade for Kalen Ballage. That fell through.
And then they ended up getting him for free afterwards.
Please don't forget that. Because what do you want?
There is no rational coaching here. You know this. You're a Jets fan. Just avoid all Jets running backs.
Well, I mean, I assume that Gase doesn't necessarily last the entire season.
Why has he lasted this long?
Well, I do think, if I'm being, completely honest about the entire thing, I mean, that Adam Gase is not going to be the New York Jets head coach next year. Or if they are, I will find a way to somehow manipulate my brain to no longer have to root for the Jets, the Mets, and the Knicks, which I've been trying for years, but have been failing. But I do think that they're just like, what does it matter at this point? This team is a disaster. They've already started the sell-off, as you saw with that trade yesterday. So what difference does it make if it's Adam Gase or what if you want Greg Williams to coach? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no on Perine then, and we will not add him. That's fine. Adam, I'm not even going to ask you about it because I got yelled at, so I'm just going to move on. It's fine. Let's go to wide receiver here then, guys. Adam, there are a couple of intriguing names here. A lot of guys who are repeat offenders on this show because they are just not being picked up by fantasy managers to my great chagrin. So, Adam, who's your number one waiver wire pickup for wide receiver?
It's Travis Fulgham now. And with the Zach, it was Travis Fulgham beforehand, but it's even more so now with the Zach Ertz news. I also think DeSean Jackson, who's a lot more available than Travis Fulgham, is pretty interesting. This is a team that throws the ball a lot. So, yeah, this is a downfield guy for Carson Wentz. We know he likes to throw downfield. So Jackson I don't know if he's number 2. Fulgham's number 1. And I will say I'm probably not going to be as high on Mike Williams as other people. I'd like to hear what you guys feel about Mike Williams, but Fulgham's 1 for me.
Okay, Tags, how about you?
I have Mike Williams as number 1. Fulgham's right there at number 2. So I'm definitely curious to hear the Mike Williams stuff because we've watched Justin Herbert to walk into, let's just say, less than ideal circumstances and played really well. I mean, against Kansas City, a team that is better against quarterbacks than I think anybody realizes. They're legit, I want to say that they're the number 2 team against wide receivers right now. So it's a team that typically quarterbacks struggle against. Carolina has allowed the fewest yards per attempt in the NFL. He played well there. Tampa Bay, one of the better defenses in the league, a really complete defense, and that was with Vita Vea on the team. Then he goes and plays the Saints, who I know that they don't look great on paper this year, but in terms of DVOA, they're still the number 13 defense, pass defense out there. They just played some really tough competition. So Justin Herbert has played fantastic, and now you mean to tell me that Mike Williams is out of his bye week against Jacksonville, Denver, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Jets? Sign me the hell up. I mean, these games are fantastic, and Keenan Allen dealing with the back issues. I imagine that Keenan Allen's going to be fine. He's going to be back in the lineup, and he is the go-to guy, but Keenan Allen has never been a touchdown machine. He's never been a guy that's scoring more than 6 touchdowns in a season, unless you go back to his very, very early years. Now, that can change, with Justin Herbert, but Herbert, with the way he's thrown the ball and the way he's hitting 300 yards in almost regularly, I believe he can support 2 fantasy wide receivers. This is a very, very top-heavy offense without Austin Eckler. You have Mike Williams, you have Keenan Allen, you have Hunter Henry. Outside of that, it's what are we looking at? Jalen Guyton? So I like Mike Williams a lot. I think he's a long-term solution, whereas Fulgham, the first time that he kind of screws up, he's going to be replaced. Jalen Reagor is actually able to be activated really soon. He's going to be back in the lineup. Alshon Jeffery's coming back. DeSean Jackson's back. Fulgham has this role. Adam Kaplan talked about it on SiriusXM late last week, saying that he's playing the X receiver role for the remainder of the season as far as they're concerned, and it's hard to disagree with them with the way that he's played the last couple weeks, but at the same time, we can't pretend that Carson Wentz hasn't been bad in terms of what he's done. I just feel like that there's more questions about Fulgham than there is about Mike Williams right now.
Adam, go ahead. Counterpoint.
Yeah, look, I've been blown away by Justin Herbert, but even with these good games against Kansas City and Carolina, Mike Williams had 3 catches in those 2 games for 31 yards. So I just look at him as he's only had 1 good game this year, and Keenan Allen got hurt in that game. And that's basically what it is. And also, I don't really buy Herbert this year. I think if you're a Chargers fan, you're ecstatic with what's happened. But it's so hard for a rookie quarterback. When was the last time we had a rookie quarterback do really well as a passer? You know, Baker Mayfield, he wasn't really that great as a fantasy quarterback. He was just good as for a rookie. Cam Newton was great as a rookie, but, you know, obviously he did so much with his legs. This is a position that has a steep learning curve. So I think that he's been so good, and even though there are some good matchups coming up, I just feel like Herbert's going to struggle just because he's a rookie. And Mike Williams, yeah, it just comes down to the fact that he's only had 1 good game. And week 1 wasn't that bad, 4 catches for 69 yards on 9 targets. But he's only had 1 good game, and it was with Keenan Allen injured. So I don't trust him that much.
Adam, let me follow up on Fulgham here for a second, because I agree. I have Williams 1 and Fulgham 2, but they're 1A and 1B right now. So I would want to add them both. But I do want to ask you, because Tags referenced the Adam Kaplan report, that essentially Fulgham is the X receiver, no matter what happens. But assuming that Alshon Jeffery eventually returns to health, which I've been basically recommending Jeffery as like a top 3 waiver wire pickup for the last 3 weeks, so egg on my face. But assuming that Jeffery does return to health soon, and DeSean Jackson, who is supposed to play on Thursday, assuming that they're both back, do you really think that Fulgham has legitimately carved out a role for himself rest of season?
Probably, but I don't want to oversell my enthusiasm for Fulgham. I just think he's the best of this waiver wire group. I don't think he's going to be a guy who wins you a fantasy league. But, yeah, what are we expecting from Alshon Jeffery at this point? You know, and what are we expecting from DeSean Jackson? I think there's opportunity there, but DeSean Jackson's, 34 years old? Yep. So Fulgham might just I was stubborn, and I didn't buy into T. Higgins. And I was stubborn, and I didn't buy into Chase Claypool. And I don't want to do it again. So I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to make sure he's rostered. And if I'm wrong, I'm willing to be wrong about it. But I do think there's a chance that he is legitimately their number 1 wide receiver. And Ertz not being there is a huge deal, in my opinion.
So the $1 million question is, what percent of your fab, with the understanding of, if you're ever in a situation where you're like, oh my God, I have no wide receivers this week, then you do what you got to do. But in a general sort of sense, what percent of your fab roughly would you be thinking of spending on?
And for this week, again, the Giants somehow have been pretty good against wide receivers, so keep that in mind. Not that much, because 4 running backs left with an injury this week. I want to save my fab for the next chance I get to have a Alexander Madison. I know he failed, but that type of situation, I would say at most 15% of my original budget.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And I do think that that's really what you have to be looking at, because I'm looking at a bunch of wide receivers. We've talked about the top 2, who in my opinion are the clear-cut top 2 options this week. But I go down to probably the top 6, and I'd be willing to sort of say, okay, if I have to roll with it. I mean, last week we talked about Christian Kirk, who we have not yet seen today, but there are always 5 or 6 guys who you feel like in a pinch you can get by with them. Not the same with running backs. So I agree with you on saving your money, your fab budget anyway, for running backs. Tags, who's next on your list after the top 2?
I have Keelan Cole there. He's the Cole Beasley of this year, basically. A guy that you could just grab off the waiver wire. He's always there, and he's always getting 5-6 targets in the game. He's always producing, 40, 50 yards. He just gives you a solid floor in PPR formats with a Jacksonville Jaguars team that just basically is always falling behind in games, so those targets will always be there. DJ Chark dealing with some health issues. Laviska Shenault inefficient and dealing with a hamstring injury last week. So Keelan Cole is just Mr. Reliable through bye weeks. So I have him at 3, but I think that Sterling Shepard is someone that's interesting that you could probably snag right now off waiver wires. I don't think you should play him this week against Philadelphia, because it is a tough matchup. They have been better than people think against wide receivers. But it's just more like when Sterling Shepard has been in the lineup with Daniel Jones, he's been targeted like at least 6 times, I think, in every single game. And most of the time he's seeing like 8 targets. So once he's back, he's a guy that you're probably going to be able to play through bye weeks. Those are the guys that I have in that next tier, but they're not anywhere near Mike Williams and Travis Fulgham.
Adam, let me ask you about Shepard as the Giants fan. Number 1, do you expect him to be somebody that fantasy managers can roster and potentially roll out there in their starting lineups when he does come back? And number 2, what impact do you think there is on Darius Slayton when Shepard comes back?
Not a huge impact, I wouldn't think. Slayton plays his role. He's their downfield guy. But also, we've been watching Slayton. He's been, running a lot of slant routes and getting some shorter area targets. I think Shepard should be rostered in about half of CBS leagues, which are typically 12-team leagues. I do not think he is a must have, because this offense is really bad. I mean, it's really bad. The line stinks, but he's going to be better in PPR than non-PPR. I am in one league with Mike Taglieri, and I do have Sterling Shepard in that league, but that is our IDP league where every single player that's even a little bit relevant is rostered. So, yeah, that's a good call. Actually, he slipped my mind. I had him in the waiver wire notes last week, and he did not play, but I think he's someone to look at. I'd probably rather – not probably. I would rather take a shot on DeSean Jackson than Sterling Shepard, and I'd rather take a shot on Tim Patrick than Sterling Shepard.
Thank you for mentioning Tim Patrick, because Tags essentially refuses to acknowledge that he exists or that he should be rostered. And for weeks, I've been, quasi-yelling about him. So, I mean, Adam, to me, Patrick has moved into I haven't updated my rest of season rankings yet, but he's going to be in that, he's kind of approaching the wide receiver 3 territory, because there's really very little reason to be worried about throwing him out there most weeks. He's getting the targets, he's getting the snaps, he's getting the yards. To me, he's my number 3 this week. So, Adam, I don't know. Do you think that he's a guy who, I mean, I assume this isn't less than the guys we've just been talking about with Fulgham and Williams, but he's a guy to target for me if you're wide receiver needy.
Right. You don't need to spend as much fab on him. And yes, the Chiefs, that's his matchup this coming week. They allow I have them as the 6th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but in 4 of their 5 games they play tonight, they've allowed 80 or more yards to one receiver. So this was actually a guy I was kind of team Tags. I didn't really take him that seriously. And the one thing that could hurt Patrick is if Noah Fant comes back. We don't know. He's done a lot of damage without Noah Fant in the last couple weeks. Fant left halfway through or so that game against the Jets. But I don't know. Production's production, and it's a touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games. It's 100 yards in 2 straight games. I'm going to stop ignoring it, and I'm trying not to be stubborn and just kind of buy into the production. It's there. I was like, well, he did it with the backup quarterback, this and that. At some point, production's production. So yeah, I'm going to buy in.
And I haven't yet seen exactly, what the breakdown was. I was watching that game in and out a little bit. Again, we live in New England. My son is unfortunately a Patriots fan. So we were watching that game a bit. Gilmore was on him at times, at least. I don't know if he was on him shadowing him the whole game, but I certainly saw plenty of times where Gilmore was on him. He still produced. So Tags, this would be a good what's your problem, man? What's your problem, man, with Tim Patrick?
I mean, it's Drew Lock is a problem. I've gone through Drew Lock's numbers, and did you know that he's thrown for more than 216 yards just one time in his NFL career to this point? He's thrown more than 1 touchdown twice. Noah Fant is going to come back to the lineup, and he's going to siphon some of those targets. Jerry Jeudy is a rookie that's still working into his role. I know he's playing the slot, but again, they do have that matchup coming up against Kansas City, a team that is really tough against wide receivers. Last year, they allowed the fewest yards to wide receivers in the NFL, which is kind of crazy considering how dominant the Patriots were, but that's a fact. They've been good against wide receivers, and if you look at Drew Lock, the last time he played against Kansas City's defense, which was towards the end of last year, he completed just 18 of 40 passes for 208 yards, no touchdowns, and 1 interception. Tim Patrick, he's given some performances that have been usable, but my advice would be to find the Dan in your league and trade him Tim Patrick. Throw in a trade piece. Throw in Tim Patrick with someone else and say, hey, you're getting Tim Patrick. You love this guy.
Yeah, if there's a Dan in your league, he's already rostering Tim Patrick and has been enjoying the production for 2 weeks. So slow your roll up there. Yeah, look, I'm not going crazy over him, but I'm going to say this to our producer, John. John, you can clip this. Tags, you're too low on Tim Patrick. And you can just play that every week in the intro to our show. Okay, so let me ask you guys something. How about Alshon Jeffery? He's a guy who I've basically recommended every week. And
what's your problem, man?
I don't know why. I can't quit you, Alshon Jeffery. But let me ask you, because 2 weeks ago, it looked like he might come back, and then he had the illness. This past week, it was just like, oh, everybody's trending correctly, and then it was just like, no, I'm sorry, DeSean Jackson and Alshon Jeffery are out. I don't know if he's going to play on Thursday, but are we just giving up on a guy who essentially can be a wide receiver too, and is, for the most part, when he plays? Is he somebody who you think fantasy managers should add, Adam?
Yeah, I do. I think their situation is a little bit like the Steelers, where it's hard to predict who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver for the Steelers going forward, at least in our opinion. We were talking about it yesterday on our recap show. It might just be 1 week it's Fulgham, 1 week it's Alshon, one week it's DeSean Jackson. I do think he's worth adding. Yeah, this is a week where you don't have to spend big on one wide receiver because you put in the smaller bids, the $3 bid on Alshon Jeffery or something like that, and you may have saved money and had yourself a good bargain.
Yeah, and he was dropped in one of my leagues because somebody just was so hamstrung with the waiver wire and the fact that he was out that, with their bye weeks that they had to clear some room. So he is out there in a couple leagues, and I will be making my obligatory bid on him. Tags, are you like, I'm done with this because we talk about it every week, or if he's out there, you're still adding him?
I mean, we're in the heart of bye weeks right now where it's really difficult to hold on to a guy that you're not going to be able to play, because even if he is active on Thursday night, you're not going to play him in his first week back. They've already said that he lost that X receiver role, so he's kind of going to be the backup. Now, this team will bring in 4 wide receivers on the field. They're going to play him over J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. There's going to be some playing time for Jeffery, but you don't even know how his health is coming off that foot surgery. So I don't know, man. I moved him down where it's like I understand not wanting to hold on to him anymore, because I grabbed him in a few leagues. He's been sitting there on my bench, and I keep going through, and it's like, oh crap, I need a defense.
Right.
It's on their bye. I need this. That's on the bye, and it's like, we're in the heart of bye weeks right now, so if you have to let him go, you have to. But if you don't have him on your roster and you have a spot open, or it's being held by someone like, I don't know, maybe a Tim Patrick. No,
that's way too mean. Stop.
In reality, I have Alshon Jeffery one spot behind Tim Patrick in the current waiver wire rankings. So, I mean, ideally, I don't have to grab either.
Out of curiosity, where are they in your wide receiver waiver wire rankings, Tags? Tim Patrick and
6 and 7.
Okay, they're too low, as always. Okay, let me ask you about a couple of other guys who I've seen it widely available in the league, so I think have at least, can maybe do something for needy fantasy managers. Preston Williams, who has scored touchdowns in back-to-back games, didn't really get the targets yesterday, only 18 yards, but he does have back-to-back touchdowns. James Washington, who scored the touchdown on that wide-open play last week. Of course, Deontay Johnson was back. And Adam Humphries, who is not exciting and may completely lose, any utility once Corey Davis comes back, but he is producing when he's in there. So are you willing to add any of these 3 guys?
I would say Humphries would be number 1. Preston Williams, unfortunately, going into a bye, and then he gets the Rams. So are you really going to feel comfortable starting him in 2 weeks? Obviously, you're not starting him this week, and only 3 targets, only 5 targets last week. Jamie made a good point about him, though. He is coming off the ACL. It's about a year now. Maybe he's rounding into form. So I'm not going to completely rule it out, but I don't think you have to pick him up going into his bye. Humphries is interesting. He gets 6 to 7 targets basically every game. You look at the Steelers, the last 3 slot receivers they've faced, Randall Cobb, Greg Ward, Jarvis Landry, all of them had 4 or 5 targets, and 2 of them scored a touchdown. So there's a chance, but I don't know. When you have to make that kind of argument for a player, it's probably not going to work out. But, yeah, Humphries is interesting. I would probably take a shot on like a Danny Amendola facing Atlanta or something like that over at least 2 of those 3, probably not over Humphries.
Well, yeah, as Tags and I basically say that we just throw out any normal rational analysis when it comes to the Titans, because they break all models of what you're supposed to be allowed to do. Tags, how about you? Any of those 3 guys worth adding? I will say, by the way, Adam, to your point, I feel the exact same way that Jamie did about Preston Williams. You kind of had this feeling like, okay, fine, we saw what he did last year. Now he maybe is just rounding into form, but it's really the lack of targets. It's hard to draw too many conclusions from a game that they basically had won from the word go in this last one. So they didn't have to throw a ton, but still, without the targets and with the bye week coming up, that's really the only reason why I can't go all in on Williams, but I'd really like to if I could. So how about you, Tags, with those 3?
Yeah, I'm not too excited about Williams right now, especially with the bye coming up, because again, you're holding him through the bye weeks. That's something that you just can't afford to do. This is not an offense that you need to tie yourself to. Again, he's capped out 5 targets over the last 5 weeks, so I'm not willing to buy in. Touchdowns have really carried him because he has scored in 3 of the last 4 games, but eventually that stuff's going to even out and it's going to start going other places.
All right, let's go to quarterback here. I don't know, not the greatest week for quarterback in my opinion, but Adam, is there a quarterback who you're looking to add off the waiver wire?
Well, you guys use roster percentages that are a little higher, I think, than what we use. Because I could look at a guy like Teddy Bridgewater. He's got I think New Orleans this week, and then Atlanta the following week. Carson Wentz is kind of interesting against the Giants. Deep league Kyle Allen against Dallas, but no, not really. No. Honestly, it's kind of tough. I mean, I like Derek Carr a little bit long term, but I'm certainly not starting him against Tampa Bay this week. So unless I'm missing something, I don't think there's a great waiver wire quarterback.
You're not. The roster percentages are just, I don't know whether or not everybody, because they like to stream QB, is doing the strategy, which isn't bad, by the way, where you just roster 2 and you just pick the best one each week. And again, we have a tool that sort of allows you to sort of pair the 2 guys who pair up best against each other. But yeah, our guys like listed for the ones who are widely available are Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, who's on a bye, and Phillip Rivers, who's on a bye.
Yeah.
So it's not as if there's anything really good. How about you, Tags? Is there anybody we're missing here?
Yeah, I think one player that you can add off the waiver wire, and it's probably the best one that's available like almost everywhere, and if he's not yet, he's going to be, Baker Mayfield. I know he's coming off a terrible game, and that's why he's going to be available in your league. But going against Cincinnati, this team, they played this team back in week 2 where Mayfield was coming off a bad game in week 1 against the Ravens. But in week 2, he threw for 219 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game. I know that doesn't sound crazy, but he only threw the ball 23 times because Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were kind of going off for, I think, like 250 total yards and 3 touchdowns. So, Mayfield is going to be asked to throw the ball a little bit more this week. The Bengals secondary is not particularly great. So I think Mayfield can be a streaming option.
I forgot one more player. Sorry. Garoppolo. We should probably throw him out there.
Yep.
I don't know what his roster percentage is for you guys, but he's pretty available in CBS leagues.
Yeah, and the 49ers take on the
Patriots. But, look, with him, it's just like, are they going to get a long yards after catch touchdown, right? I mean, he's so efficient. He scored 17 points on 16 pass attempts against the Jets. He scored 28 points on 33 attempts against the Rams. You just might not have any options. Garoppolo's a competent quarterback.
Well, and here's a fun fact. There are only 5 teams in the NFL who have allowed more than 8.0 yards per attempt. The Patriots are one of them.
I'm not convinced the Patriots have a great defense. They lost so much in opt-outs and whatnot. So, I think I'm not excited about Garoppolo, but I do think if you're in quarterback hell, he's your little Satan that can help you.
That's an interesting way to put it. I was thinking, by the way, Tags, I will get to QB streamers in a minute, which we basically cover in this scenario. Mayfield was on my list. I am a little worried, though, because he was banged up coming in. I didn't like the reports on him coming in, which were essentially trending in the right direction, should be okay to play. I don't want to hear that because that puts some doubt in it. And then he got his butt kicked a little bit when he was against the Steelers. And they pulled him at the end of the game when it was over, probably just to save him. And he's supposed to be okay right now going in. But the injury, to whatever it is, his chest or his ribs, does make me a little nervous about starting him, even though it is a good matchup. How about tight end here, Adam? There are a couple of interesting names here on tight end, which I don't usually say because tight end stinks, but a couple interesting names. Who's your top tight end at?
If you're in shallower leagues, I think that there are a lot of good tight ends, at least tight ends with good matchups. My number one of all the tight ends that are out there would be Gronkowski, but he's probably rostered. He's 68% rostered. I'd say Austin Hooper. Hooper has 23 targets in his last 3 games. So he's, and Trey Burton's obviously up there too, but he's on a bye. So I would say Austin Hooper would be the guy I'm looking at.
Okay. How about you, Tags? Yeah, he's a little bit sort of, we cut, for when we're adding and looking and we do our waiver wire rankings, I think we cut it 50%. He's just over that. But Hooper is a great add because he's finally getting involved in that offense. How about you, Tags?
Yeah, Hooper has seen his role grow like every week. His target share went from 5%, then to 17% the next 2 weeks, then 23, 27, 21%. So he's definitely there. Teams are targeting the Bengals a lot. They've actually seen more targets to tight ends than any other team in the league right now. So Hooper is definitely a good one, but he didn't make the cut. One player that I need to find out about is Dallas Goedert.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, he's eligible to come back this week. I don't know if he's going to play or not because
I can't imagine that he's going to be ready from Thursday. They just activated him, right?
Did they even activate him yet? I don't even know if they did.
I think I may have misread that, but I thought they either activated him yesterday or today, so they have 21 days then to get him going. But he's going to be activated before Zach Ertz comes back. So he is going to be because Ertz is out a month, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be playing before Ertz comes back. So long term for sure. So Tags, what if he's not playing this week? Is he still your top ad? For tight end?
Probably if you're just looking for someone to stash, because again, Trey Burton and Irv Smith are on their bye weeks. Those are 2 guys that have seen major increases in their roles in their offense, and I'm guessing Irv Smith, that's only going to continue to grow with their bye week. They can install him in the offense a bit more. But if you need someone for this week, I think we have to go down to someone like Anthony Firkser against Pittsburgh, because JuJu Smith is apparently dealing with an ankle injury. They're saying that he's going to be questionable for this week. If they're already announcing that now, I don't know if they're going to rush him back. But Firkser is like he's just a quick. He looks like a wide receiver in a way. But he's like the Titans need that tight end in the offense. It's been a very big part of their offense. I had a tweet this offseason. I need to go back and find it because I said there have been 3 or 4 teams that have had top 12 tight end production. Like if you take the total team number of tight end production, only 4 teams have been in the top 12 over the last 5 years, each of the last 5 years. And it was the Chiefs, which you'd expect, the Eagles, which you'd expect, other team or whatever. But then it was the Titans where it was like, okay, JuJu Smith is going to walk into production. So clearly this has been an ongoing thing where there's been production from the Tennessee Titans tight end spot. And Firkser obviously stepped up last week when JuJu Smith had to leave. So if you're looking for someone this week, I guess you could look there. You could also look to Dan's favorite guy of all time, Logan Thomas.
Yes, Logan Thomas, of course, greatest tight end of all time. Yeah, he did finally find the end zone. He is playing Dallas next week. It is weird because I'm looking at the list of available tight ends. I want to add Goedert first, but he's almost certainly not going to play on Thursday against the Giants. I want to add Trey Burton, but he's on a bye this week. Irv Smith Jr. is getting more involved and seeing his snap percentage up and his target share. He's on a bye. Anthony Firkser against Pittsburgh. If JuJu Smith is out, Firkser becomes probably a top 12 play, but we don't know whether or not JuJu Smith is going to be out. So that kind of leaves Logan Thomas as the guy you're looking at, or maybe Darren Fells,
yeah.
if Akins. Do we know anything about
Akins? He was a concussion, so I thought he was going to be back this week. So I don't know. He was in limited practice all last week, so I thought he was going to play. And I've upgraded. As long as Akins is out, I'm willing to start Fells as a streamer.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, he plays the Packers. What about, assuming Goedert doesn't come back and Ertz is out, anybody want to Richard Rodgers at all? I mean, the targets have to go somewhere for Wentz. I don't know how he continues to produce from a fantasy perspective because you watch him play and it's like he's just throwing the ball up half the time and it's just like, I hope this comes out somewhere, and then it does somehow. But are any of these guys, Adam, other guys, so I'll go Goedert, Burton, Firkser, Thomas, Smith, Fells, Rodgers. Is Fells a guy? Because he'll probably be the better option this week. Any of these guys you want to add?
I think Fells, assuming Akins is out, it's a good enough matchup. The Packers have faced 4, I would call, solid tight ends, and 3 of them had 50 yards. Gronkowski's the only one who scored. Obviously, we're talking about players that we're not excited about for this week. However, I think that you look at all of the waiver wire players, if we don't get bad news on the running backs and these replacement running backs aren't in play, I think you could make a case that Dallas Goedert is the best long-term play of anyone because Ertz is out for a while, and Ertz has had a really bad year. I mean, Dallas Goedert was, in some ways, playing better than Zach Ertz. So this is an emerging player. There's no way he should be on your waiver wire, I think. You have got to get Dallas Goedert.
It is really weird. I guess I understand now with the IR being 3 games that a lot more players are being placed on IR, but if you drafted Goedert, he should have been in your IR spot. Like, he's only 32.6% rostered across all formats. That's crazy to me that he's available. So he is my number 1 tight end pickup, but I agree with you. If we knew, especially that he's coming back shortly, there is an argument to be made that he should be even your number 1 this week. He's not for me. He's in my top 10. But certainly he's somebody who, if you can afford to, go ahead and add. All right, let's get to our top 5 overall waiver wire pickups. Adam, you can start us off. What do you got?
Jeez, man. I guess it's Justin Jackson, Boston Scott. Giovani Bernard would be number 1 if we find out that Mixon is going to miss any time. Other than that, I'm looking at Travis Fulgham, Tim Patrick, and all right, I'm going to throw out a name. He's not really in my top 5, but we can't go the whole show without talking about him. Antonio Brown is eligible to play in Week 9. Something to think about. He doesn't have a team yet. Something to think about, though. But if it's not him, Hooper on the technicality that he's slightly more owned than your cutoff.
Yeah, you're cheating, but that's fine. Do you expect, out of curiosity, Adam? I know you have no inside info, but just wondering your opinion. Do you expect Brown to sign somewhere and actually potentially be a fantasy asset this year?
I don't know. I don't think the Seahawks need him, and that was the team that was rumored to be. I'm going to say no, but gosh, if he does sign, he could be really. I'll never roster him, just for the record. I'm pretty disgusted by the things he's done, but a lot of people don't care about that. So there's a chance. I just want to throw it out there because he's been a completely forgotten name. He's got an 8-game suspension, and he's eligible to come back in Week 9.
No, it's good to point that out because, frankly, I had forgotten about it as well, so he wasn't on my list. All right, Tags, who's your top 5 for the week?
Number 1, Justin Jackson. Number 2, Mike Williams. Number 3, Travis Fulgham. Number 4, Boston Scott. And number 5, Dallas Goedert.
Okay, so we are close. We're all close. And you guys have made a lot of good points on Jackson that I may consider putting him number 1. It's the same fat bit. For me right now, it's Boston Scott, then Jackson. Mike Williams is number 3. Travis Fulgham is number 4. And Tim Patrick Tags is number 5. But I will say that if we find out that Joe Mixon is out, then Giovani Bernard is going to pop up to 1 or 2 for sure. But, I assume that we'll know a little bit more about that before we actually have to put in our waiver claims. Let's go very briefly to QB and DST streamers. We kind of talked about the QB streamers already. People who, you mentioned Bridgewater, you mentioned Garoppolo, maybe Baker Mayfield. If Justin Herbert is out there, because he was on a bye against Jacksonville. But I don't think there's anybody we need to add unless you guys think we missed somebody, or we can go straight to DST. What do you think?
DST.
Wonderful. For DST, who's your streamer, Adam?
This is a great week. Great week for DSTs. I would say if they're available, the Bills. If not, I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. Ugh, such a bad defense. I'm going to go with the Cowboys against the football team.
Okay. Well, that did work out against the Giants when they played that. I know because, again, my 7-year-old streamed the Dallas DST and was very excited at the touchdown. But, yes, of course, your best option, if they are available, is insert team playing the Jets. Always, no matter what. So if the Bills are available, I think they're roughly 60 to 70% rostered. But if they are available in your league, please pick them up. How about you, Tags?
I think the Eagles are my top streamer this week against the Giants. The Giants, coming into this week, I haven't checked the numbers this week, but they had allowed every defense to score at least 8 fantasy points in standard scoring formats. That's like basically a top 10 defense every week. Daniel Jones has been sacked 17 times. Yep. The Eagles are desperate for a win. They're going to be at home. So, the Eagles.
Yep. Among the really widely available DSTs, the Eagles are also my top pick. All right, let's finish up with drop or keep. 10 names. You can just say drop or keep. If you want to add any brief analysis, feel free. But if not, you are good with just drop or keep. Let us start, Adam, with Damian Harris, drop or keep.
Keep.
Tags.
Keep.
Keep for me as well. Tags, drop or keep. Mike Gesicki.
Keep.
Adam.
Keep, for sure.
Fine, keep. Adam, Julian Edelman, drop or keep.
I'll keep him. Couple more weeks.
Tags.
Yeah, he's a keep, I guess.
I am okay to drop. I'm not spite dropping because I never do that. But if I had to make a move, I'd really be okay. I don't see it happening right now for this team. What I told you that you were not allowed to talk about, I'll throw it back to Adam, even though he did the last one. Drop or keep, Cam Akers.
I'm dropping him. Not for sure,
Tags.
but drop.
Yeah, I mean, unless you have really deep benches where you can hang on to handcuffs. But right now, he just doesn't have any value.
Yeah, I'm totally good to drop on this one. Tags, Jarvis Landry, drop or keep.
Keep.
Adam.
Yeah, I'll keep him.
Yeah, I guess. I'm fine to do that, but I don't really
You need to
care.
give real answers, Dan. People are tired of
I know. Basically, Adam, every answer I give to that, I was like, I don't really care. Like, fine, you can drop him, but he's fine. But fine, I will keep Jarvis Landry grudgingly. Adam, drop or keep Jerry Jeudy?
Fine to drop.
Tags.
Keep.
Drop for me. I just don't see it happening. But you know who you should pick up instead? Tim Patrick. Tags. Drop or keep Leonard Fournette. By the way, that I know I've done it right, Adam. Whenever Tags goes,
no, it's the worst. I mean, it just depends on your bench spots, and if you need to drop someone for a bye week, I guess you could drop him. I mean, Ronald Jones has a death grip on that job right now, and one fumble is not going to change that anymore. It was there, but it's not anymore.
That is the thing. He has moved, I think, beyond the whoops, I missed a blitz pickup. Whoops, I fumbled. I lose my job. Right, so I'm good to drop for now.
I don't know about that.
Oh, you don't think so?
I hope so, but I don't know. One more week. I want to see when he's actually healthy what it looks like.
Okay, I look forward to both Tags and I talking about how we really don't trust Ronald Jones. We don't think he's going to have a great game, and then rank him 3rd overall. Adam, drop or keep Robert Tonyan?
I think I'm gonna keep him.
Tags.
Tonyan, I'll keep him.
I mean, I will keep him, but I will say this, that if I can find a streaming tight end that I would have ranked above him, I'd have no problem in that situation cutting the cord, because I think he's now below the line of people who I would say I have to hold this guy under all circumstances if I'm looking at tight end. Let's get a little spicier for the last 2 now. I mean, this is a little different because I put this list together before I heard the news, and I thought it was going to be minor based on it. But drop or keep Zach Ertz?
I think you can drop him.
Adam.
Yeah.
Tags?
I don't want to. I really don't want to drop. Like, have you seen the state of tight ends? Maybe this helps get Zach Ertz right. I don't know.
I mean, you're without him right now. I mean, assuming you can stash him on your IR spot,
right?
Of course,
if you can stash him, I would.
But other than that, Tags, I don't see how you could possibly say, I'm going to just keep this dude on my bench given where we are for 4 weeks. And I've been like the biggest Ertz apologist the entire year. Yeah. I just don't think you can.
No, I get it, but this is what IR spots are for.
All right, he's a drop. So I think I know the answer to our final one, but I have to ask the question, Adam, drop or keep JuJu Smith-Schuster?
Keeping him. Sorry, keeping him.
Whoa. I was like, whoa.
I did not know the answer to that.
Okay,
I'm just kidding.
My bad.
All right, Tags.
I'll keep him. I mean, I'm grossed out, but I don't think you want to start him right now. But I think you keep him for now.
Man, that was closer than I thought, you guys. I thought that there would be much more of a get out of here, Dan. Stop asking these questions. I'm also keeping him. I'm not quite as disgusted as Tags, but I'm very disappointed. I will say that. All right, that's it for today. Adam, I can't thank you enough for joining us. You were a great guest. It's great that I learned that I apparently steal some of your lines, but that's fine with me. Don't forget to check out our waiver assistant over at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. That will help with all your pickups. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode. I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.